Hello and welcome back to So You Got a Life Sci Degree. We're your hosts, Lisa and Frida, two life sci undergrad students trying to navigate our future careers. This is episode 5, and we're talking to Dr. Rizwana Islam about her role as a director at Takeda, a pharmaceutical company. How are you doing, Frida?
I'm doing pretty good. I got to go home last weekend for Thanksgiving weekend to see my family. That was very nice. Yeah. So it was also my birthday on Saturday, which was extra nice.
Oh, that's scary. For a second, I was like, wait, I got her things, right? I got her things. I did. We're okay.
Yeah, I got a Sarah Anderson calendar.
Yeah, I have no memory. So yeah. Yeah. What else?
For my birthday, my sister, she has like a paper route, as she's like in grade 8. She has a paper route. That's her job. And she basically, so she puts away a certain amount for her savings, and then she has like a certain spending amount. Yeah. And she basically saved up her spending amount and bought me a pair of really expensive earrings.
What?
Which I was like, what? Like, why would you do that? What kind of 13-year-old does that?
Oh my god! Wow, that's really sweet.
Yeah, there's like part of me that's kind of just like annoyed, but I don't. It's like not a similar type of annoyance of like when you miss the bus or something. I'm just like confused as to why I'm annoyed, but like, yeah, I think it just generally has to do with her being like way too nice of a sibling. Yeah,
right. That is so annoying.
Yeah, for sure.
Your siblings are nice. Yeah. So I don't have much to talk about this week, mostly because I used all my stories on our mini cast / I'm saving them. But I do have a little announcement that I want to make to the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So I listen to a podcast called Hello Internet that is currently on interim, but they have several seasons and they do wacky things, like, for example, having an official animal of the podcast, like how the official animal of Canada is the loon or the beaver, and how we have an official flower. So you can have an official animal of the podcast, and lo and behold, the official animal of our podcast is officially the squirrel. Now, what species of squirrel, Lisa, do you ask? And the answer is that I do not know. This is a purely wacky endeavor. It is not backed up with species definitions. So yeah, that's going to be a thing. So if you want to exercise your full patriotic potential, you can check out the other squirrel stories that we have, which are littered around our minicast episodes. And to access those, you can become a patron for $1 a month.
Yeah. And if you, fellow listener, have any suggestions for which species of squirrel we should make our animal, let us know.
Oh my gosh, we should do that. We should have a voting thing for like what species of squirrel should it be? Like, should it be like the North American gray squirrel? Should it be like the Asian red squirrel? Like, what do you think? I think it should be the North American squirrel.
Yeah. Besides the squirrel update, any other updates, Lisa?
Again, not really, because I'm like saving all my stories, but I have been playing Among Us, which is this game that's based on your phone. It's an app, you download it, and you can play online with your friends by creating your own. This episode is not sponsored by them. I don't know why I'm reading this like a sponsorship.
Yeah, I also feel like Among Us is just like so widespread now that anyone who's like under the age of 25 is also playing Among Us.
I know, yeah. I mean, honestly, most of the people in the online servers are under the age of 14. Which, like, it's just so strange when you're like, oh, I made a friend. And then someone asks your friend their age and they're like, I'm 12. And you're like, oh boy.
Yeah. For the floor fellows, we have like duty shifts where we have to stay up on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night until 2 a.m. just in case anything happens when we take our students. But yeah, basically like every duty night, in the floor fellow chat, it's like, here's the Among Us code, come play with us if you want.
I'm glad that you're staying vigilant.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is a game where you can drop out. Goodness knows that people do it online all the time, so
yeah.
Okay, you ready to talk to Rizwana?
Yeah, let's get into it. Rizwana is a director at Takeda, a pharmaceutical company in Boston, Massachusetts. She completed her undergraduate degree in biology at Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. She then completed a PhD in biochemistry at Harvard University, followed by a postdoctoral position. In 2012, she started working at a biotechnology company called Shire, which was eventually acquired by Takeda. Thank you for joining us today, Rizwana.
You're very welcome.
So This is a heads up for our listeners that Rizwana works in the United States, Boston specifically, as we mentioned. And on this podcast, we usually talk about Canadian industries. But Rizwana is super cool, so we just had to chat with her.
And with that, we have our first question for you. To start with, we were wondering if you could give us a brief description of your job and what the main responsibilities are.
Absolutely. So before I do that, though, thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you guys.
Mhm.
Sounds like a lot of fun. So yeah, let me tell you what I do right now. So I am in our research at a pharmaceutical company based out of, it's a Japanese company, but there is a large presence in the US with offices in Boston and also in the West Coast. There are actually offices, not research though, in Canada as well. It's a global company.
Mhm.
It's actually, I think, the ninth largest pharmaceuticals in the world.
Mm.
And what I do is, so Takeda has many different focus areas where we work on. And my focus area is rare disease research.
Oh, wow.
So I lead a group of scientists and we focus on rare genetic diseases. So I work in the preclinical side of things, and my job description would be taking a project all the way from ideation to proof of concept in the clinic.
Right, right. That's really cool. Wow.
Yeah, that's very cool. Just digging a little bit deeper into what do you work on specifically, maybe in a day-to-day context, or like what does your week look like in general?
Sure. So I have about 9 or 10 people who work with me in the lab. I have multiple projects. As I said, my job is to basically come up with an idea, find an indication, and then find a target for that indication that we can basically drug. Decide on the modality, which is, should we target that, say, there's a protein that is aberrant in patients that causes the disease. So you want to either put in the correct version of the protein. Then what do you do? Can you pick gene therapy? Is gene editing the best way? Is just
Mm.
enzyme replacement therapy? Can you have like a small molecule that people will just take orally? So decide on the best modality, and depends on the disease and the way it impacts the patients. And then we run experiments. The initial experiments are coming up with a subset of tool molecules, setting up, say, cell-based assays and so forth. And the next step is, once you have more of a concrete idea about the pathway, the biology, and understanding of the molecule itself, then you run experiments in animals to test out how long the drug will last, what its clearance is, how efficacious is this. And then you put together a data package, you file an IND, and then goes into clinical trials.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
then after 3 stages of clinical trials, if there's benefit in people, the drug gets approved and then it's marketed as a drug that's accessible to patients.
Mhm, yeah, that sounds like a lot of responsibility. So again, super cool to be chatting with you, because you're someone who is actually like a director at a pharmaceutical company. Farida actually didn't mention to me that you were so involved in the research aspect of it. And that's really interesting to me because I'm probably interested in pursuing research as a career.
Cool.
And yeah, so we were wondering if you could walk us through, because what you just described, that was, like long term, months and possibly even years of work. We were wondering what would it look like if you just walked into work on a Monday? Like what would your day look like from, I don't know, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. or whatever it is?
That would be very boring to hear because it meetings after meetings after meetings after meetings. So my work day would be, I would say, 80% meetings, and then
Wow.
the rest of it would be planning out projects. Some of it would be planning out presentations, and then a lot of it would be interacting with other scientists, outlining what I would like to see to be done for a project, and then making sure that my projects are on track, for as well in terms of timelines, as well as for budgets.
Yeah, that's actually sounds following up your point about it being very research heavy, Lisa. It actually sounds very similar to like a PI role in like a lab
Yeah,
because you're very
yeah.
much overseeing these kind of research projects, like directing, what's going to happen next. But yeah, just like how much of your time is directly interacting with the scientific literature or things like that, or just like do you usually hear about what's going on in the science from other scientists and get like an overview of decisions that you should be making?
So let me walk a step back and tell you about. So when I describe the whole drug making process, I don't typically see it all the way through. So my job, so I'm basically in preclinical research. I support projects all the way into phase one clinical trials. And even for phase one, there's a lot of support up until a project goes into a certain stage gate. That's all the preclinical work, the animal work, the in vitro work, the cell based work. That's my group. Once it starts to go into the clinic, that once we are ready, then I take on a secondary role, and then a clinical team will take on that project. And then clinicians will come in, design the trial, and then it will go into trial. I will still keep on supporting the group, but not as a project lead anymore. All right. And then when it comes to interactions, as you say, as you can think about it, so I'm not in the lab doing experiments myself. So I need a lot of help and support. We do a lot of work internally. We have labs and we have a vivarium at Takeda in the building that we're in. But we also do a lot of work with external, what we call contract research organizations, CROs. And then we also do a lot of work with academic labs as well. And there's always crosstalk. There's always conversations. If we are, there's always talk with clinicians as well to make sure that whatever drug we're designing is safe, it's efficacious, it is what people would like to have as the best solution, as the best in class therapeutic.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting hearing to you talk about your involvement in the creation of a new drug from, in vitro to cell-based all the way to stage one clinical, because our very first guest on this podcast, Kara Griffiths, and she actually works at Gilead, and she works in market access. So her job is basically to get drugs insured under whether it be the Canadian government's health insurance plan, the Ontario health insurance plan, or private insurance plans. And so yeah, now it's interesting. We almost kind of did it backwards. Maybe we should have spoken to you first, but yeah, it's interesting now that we've gotten kind of both ends of the process in drug development now. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of cool. One of the things that we were wondering if you could speak to is because you describe a lot of responsibilities, having to oversee this project. That's no small task. And so we were wondering if you could describe to us your progression through the different levels at Takeda and kind of how you acquired the knowledge that you need to have all these major responsibilities.
So I did my PhD in molecular biology, and then I actually stayed on in the same lab, finishing up some of the work. So although my resume says there's a postdoc in there, it's actually I finished up my graduate work, did a little bit of work to finish up what I was doing during my degree, and then from there straight on moved to Shire.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually didn't do an extended postdoc. And I would say all my training when it comes to learning about the industry and training and all of that came from directly being thrown in the fire. So I learned as I went. I started as a scientist at Shire. My first project, so Shire has been working on rare diseases for a while. They were the industry leaders. They had a very strong focus on rare diseases. And I worked on various different areas of drug development. I led my first project maybe in the second year
Oh
after I
wow.
joined Shire.
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah, and so there's certain stage gates into drug development, and then I thankfully was able to push that project to a certain stage gate to get it ready for IND filing. And although it didn't go through because that was for strategic reasons, not for
Mm-hmm.
efficacy reasons or any other biology of the therapeutic itself. But I did get a patent out of it, which is great. And so so no, that I'm thankful to have gotten that, and it was interesting work. So basically, it progressed from there. The responsibilities grew, and then I started handling multiple projects, and then started getting a smaller group, which expanded to the group that I have right now. And then, yeah, just basically took on more responsibilities once. Shire was acquired by Takeda, there were a lot of changes in leadership, and then that also actually created an opportunity for people who were still there. And I took on a bigger role after we were acquired by Takeda.
Cool. Thanks for running us through that.
Yeah, very nice. I kind of have two follow-up questions, I guess. You said that the company didn't launch it for strategic reasons. Is it possible for you to maybe like kind of outline in general what that might look like?
Sure. So honestly, we were scooped, right? Just like it happens in academia. We were not the only ones with a certain idea.
Mm.
And then by the time we got everything together, there was another company who just published their patent. Although it was different enough that we were able to get a patent out, as a drug, we would be competing for the same market. And then, like I said, our focus is to try and get therapy for people who do not have any option, so who do not have any current treatment. So it didn't make sense for us to go into the same disease because there were already people out there who are doing the same thing.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And part of our motivation for asking you the question about how you progressed through the hierarchy of roles at Takeda was just that the like what kind of roles are available in a pharmaceutical company is very hard to understand from the outside, I would say.
Right.
And especially just even hearing the work that you do as a director, like that's not what I would have thought at all. So can you speak a little bit more about like the different kinds of roles that are available within a pharmaceutical company or within Takeda in like specifically?
Sure. Honestly, even I don't know how many different types of roles there are.
Right.
I'll stick to research and I'll tell you
Yeah.
a little bit about research, and then we can expand from there.
Sure. Yeah.
So, what does a project team looks like? I mentioned that I've been leading projects. What does that really mean, right? So, a project team would involve people from the research group, but there's also people from DMPK who do PK/PD analysis. There are people who look at safety, so toxicologists. There are people who look at patent landscape, so legal. There's people who look at the commercial aspects. There's people who would look at regulatory aspects. There would be people who look at what am I missing? Manufacturing, which is very, very critical. And all of this is just still research, right? So, and this is preclinical research. And then when you have an advanced project, you need the doctors and the clinicians to tell you how to reach the patients. And that's another group. Then you have the strategists who tell you what diseases to work on. Where is the most unmet need? At least that's very, very important for us to go after indications where there's a lot of unmet need. And then there are, even supporting research. There are people who work with the animals. So they're pharmacologists, but in vivo support. There are translational scientists. There are histologists. It takes an enormous group of people to support all of these. And then depending on, so I mentioned modality before. So when we think about drugs, typically what comes to mind is an oral pill, right? But drugs can be given lots of different ways. Drugs can be a lot of different things. They can be small molecules, they can be large molecules, they can be proteins, they can be gene therapies, they can be whatever, right? So usually a project lead would partner with a modality lead. If it's a small molecule, for example, they would partner with a chemist. If it's a gene therapy project, they would partner with the person who's expert in gene therapy and so forth. And then, of course, there are functions outside of research, marketing, salespeople, HR, other leadership, and then telling you a little bit more about Takeda itself. How it's structured is we have different units that are divided by therapeutic areas that people focus on. We call them DDUs, drug discovery units. Ours is rare diseases, rare genetic diseases. Others are neuroscience. There's another which is GI. There's another which is oncology and so forth. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure, but that's definitely a lot more than I could have even thought of.
And yeah, and I guess thinking about it, it kind of makes sense when you think about how certain drugs can have a high cost because there's a huge team behind these things, from the people who are taking care of the animals to, all the different teams involved. You described a lot of different kinds of roles. And one, I was wondering, are there different levels of educational requirements, like master's versus PhD versus a lot of industry experience? And then two, some of these levels seem like they could lead into others. Like, for example, you yourself, you mentioned that you kind of took on more responsibilities over time and eventually became a director. So I was wondering if that's common in pharmaceutical companies, if people often move up towards the company, or if it's more off, at least at Takeda, for them to find a new hire for those kinds of roles.
I wouldn't say anything is scripted. If there are people at the company who want a particular job and are well qualified for it, there's definitely room to move up. If there isn't a good fit and there's a definite need for a skill set that the current group lacks, then it's an outside hire. It's actually as simple as that. It depends on the needs of a project. It depends on the needs of the company at the time. And what else? I'm sorry, I missed your.
Apology. That was kind of my bad for asking two very different questions in one question. The second question I had was actually little teaser. I think this episode is episode 5 that's going to be coming out. And so episode 6, we're actually planning on releasing this thing where Frida made this case to me about why it can be a disadvantage to your career as a whole to get a PhD.
Sometimes in certain contexts.
Sometimes in specific circumstances, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was wondering, yeah, like just like what are the educational requirements, generally speaking, like to be able to get, yeah.
Right. No, thank you for that. And it's actually a very important question. So I would, for people who are thinking about their career choices and thinking about going to grad school and spending, say, 5 years on a PhD degree, do it only if you love it. Okay, it's not worth your time or your effort spending that amount of time doing something just for the sake of something you might not even really like. I really enjoyed being in grad school. I had an absolutely amazing time. It is probably the only time you can explore your own scientific interests and have the freedom to go in the direction and probe as much as you want or as little as you want, go in the direction that you want. That is, unless you pursue a career in maybe academic research, that where you expand onto these ideas. If you are thinking about going into industry, do a PhD. Absolutely recommended, but do it for the right reasons. Only if you're interested, really, really interested in it. Don't do it because you think you might get a certain title at a certain company.
That is music to Frida's ears.
Right. But honestly, like I said, I would not argue against it either. I mean, like I said, it's very subjective. If you enjoy being in the lab, if the work-life balance can be hard to maintain. You have to be very dedicated. You have to probably work 70, 80 hours per week. Is not very uncommon at all. Some people will quote you numbers that are even higher. So you have to be dedicated. You have to want to do it, right? Can you get into pharmaceutical companies without a PhD degree? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a ceiling to where you can get without a PhD degree? On paper, absolutely not. In reality, I would say maybe. So I would say that without a PhD, can you really progress quite a bit? Yes. The answer is not no. You definitely can rise to a very high position. It probably will take you additional time,
Mm-hmm.
but the additional time you would have probably spent doing your PhD anyway. Again, I'm not giving you a straight yes or no answer because there is no straight yes or no answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, honestly. I feel like I've been getting a lot of straightforward advice recently. I find that, as a young person, I get a lot of advice from my school or from other places, like, like the sky is the limit, like companies don't discriminate. But yeah, like I genuinely appreciate the more realistic advice about, okay, this is like what the world actually works like and just not just the pretty things we say.
No, so don't be discouraged either, right? So if you like studying, if you like your science experiments, go for it, right? What I'm saying is don't do it because it might get you a certain title at a certain company.
Mm-hmm.
Do it because you love doing it. And then, but I'll give you the other side as well. So think about, we talked about the research and what the different hierarchy levels are, what the different titles are. So in my group, there's me. I'm other than it being a director, my other title within the company is a pathway head. So in my group, I have a couple of project leads who report into me, and then these project leads have scientists and research associates who report into them. So for a hire as into a research scientist position, you would need a biology degree, a bachelor's degree. You would not need a graduate degree. And then as a scientist, which is a couple of steps above, we would typically request a person with a PhD or a bachelor's or a master's with a certain number of years of experience. Okay, so you can get it either way. I mean, you just need to gather the experience so that you know what you're being pushed into. What the PhD gives you is basically it helps you ask the right questions. You're given a project. I've worked in such diverse areas that I've had basically no training in. That I'm not a biology expert. What I do is basically try and answer the questions that will get me the correct solution, right? So the PhD helps you think and probe problems and answer and find answers to those solutions. It's just developing a certain way of thinking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And what I did, my PhD was in memory formation of memory. Has absolutely nothing to do with what I do now.
Yeah, it's surprising how much we've heard that before.
Right.
Yeah, I guess probing the you should do your PhD if you absolutely love science type of that statement a little bit more. We're all lovers of science here. We generally like empirical evidence or just finding more objective ways to look at things. So I think there would be a lot of people who are kind of interested in doing a PhD, maybe just for the title, but maybe kidding themselves about like, yeah, I do like science enough. Like, what would you think is a good way to kind of
like how do you gauge if it would be a good fit for you? How do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So let me put it in a very different way of thinking. So I gave you the makeup of my group to tell you something else. So in my group, there are two pathway heads. There are, I would say, I don't know, 20 scientists, and there would be that many more research associates. There's more number of people who are hired on at an earlier level. There's just more number of those positions available.
Yes.
Right. So if you don't have a PhD degree, you start as a research associate and build up your experience that way.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's easier to get those jobs, but there's more of those jobs available. So there's more opportunities if you start at that level. With a PhD, what a lot of people probably get disheartened by is that you do a PhD that could be 5 years, you do a postdoc that could be another 5 years, and then you become so specialized that there might not be a good market for that. So that's the flip side of the same argument.
Right.
And nobody's journey is the same.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, and I'm glad you shared that. Kind of in line with, maybe not getting dreams in the sky kind of advice and getting a little bit more realistic information. We want to ask, like, how much you think that name recognition matters for like maybe institutional name recognition, because obviously you went to Harvard, which is super cool. But yeah, like, what are your thoughts on that? Also, feel like if you don't feel comfortable asking.
No, I'm happy to answer that. I don't think it helps only a very tiny bit, I would say.
Okay.
Honestly, rather than the university, I think what matters is what your experiences have been. If you are working with, say, a lot of you would go on to do thesis, right? Write thesis, and then you're working, say, with a PI who already has a partnership or some sort of a collaboration with a pharmaceutical company, for example, and you've been working on their project. You would be the perfect person for that company to hire because you already know what to do. Right? So I think those experiences, when I hire somebody, what I look for is that how much of lab, if I'm hiring for a lab position, I look for how much of a lab experience they've had
Mm.
rather than which institutions that they come from. But I wouldn't absolutely discount the university as well. If if the institution is a name that I recognize, of course I know, their standards, so I would look at them with, I guess I would know that they have been evaluated to a certain level.
Yes.
Right. But so that's definitely there. But I honestly think it's like, what kind of work have you been doing in the past that really helps to understand and get your position?
And then I guess kind of talking a bit more about your other education. Usually with our guests, we ask them a lot about, like, why did you study this for undergrad and et cetera, et cetera. But you are quite like further along in your career. So we're just going to pose this to you all in one question and ask if you can give us a brief overview of your educational path and your thoughts at each stage as you were progressing from undergrad to PhD to et cetera.
Sure. So when I started undergrad, I thought I would do environmental studies. I took a lot of courses, and after my first course, I realized environmental studies is a lot about policy and not as much about science, and I was very happy with that. And I had taken a biology class just because, it filled one of the science requirements or something like that.
Mhm.
I was not really interested in, before my undergrad, I loved math and physics, not biology or chemistry as much.
Huh.
So after my first intro molecular bio class, I think the experiment that they had us do was collect cheek swabs and run DNA sequencing or something like that.
Oh, cool.
And that had me so hooked. Okay, this is what I'm doing. And yeah, it just took off from there. I was very, very excited and interested by all the biology courses. I had excellent professors. I actually spent a year in Cambridge University in England doing biochem. So that was really great too. It was a very nice experience overall. And then why a PhD? Honestly, at that point, I didn't really think. I was young in a foreign country. I came by myself for my undergrad. My family was still in Bangladesh. I honestly didn't think, I didn't even want to go out look for a job when I was about to finish my undergrad, and the thought didn't even occur to me to look for a job. Maybe I didn't have the confidence then. I thought a very natural progression would be to go into grad school.
Mm. Right.
And then grad school, I knew I didn't want to do an extended postdoc, and I didn't want to go into academia. I really, really wanted to go into industry. I knew that from the beginning. I wanted to work on translational science. I wanted to see, I wanted to work in drug discovery. And at the first opportunity, I took on a role in industry and basically stayed there for ever since.
That's really cool. And I think usually we hear the opposite, where people are very much clamoring for positions in academia. Can you speak more to like what your thought process was in wanting to go into industry?
I don't like teaching.
Thank you for your honesty.
I've taught as an undergrad student. I've taught as a grad student. I did not enjoy teaching at the graduate
Oh.
level much. I love the research part. I'll be very honest. I wasn't great at teaching either. People generally enjoy. You like what you like. You do what you're good at as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like the research part. I thought I was fairly good at it. I wasn't good at teaching. I didn't enjoy that. And I basically, that helped me decide I wanted to be in industry. The other reasons were, I'll be very pragmatic. So I got married right after I got my graduate degree. Young family, didn't want wanted a good work life balance. I did not
Mm-hmm.
want to do 80-hour weeks anymore. The pay is, in industry, the starting pay is quite a bit different. It's not a universally true, but typically the pay is better starting out in industry as well. So
Mm-hmm.
for very practical reasons, I always wanted to go into industry. The other thing is, something scared me off of academia. And I had seen postdocs at my university who had been at their positions for 5 years, 10 years, without an end in sight. And I didn't want to be in that position.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've definitely heard stories of people who have been doing their PhDs for 8 years.
Yeah.
But it's not just the PhD, right? So typically for an academic position, you definitely would need, at least for biology positions, you would need a postdoc as well.
I think it's getting probably worse as time is going on. But yeah, I feel like this is such a good primer for our upcoming PhD episode, Lisa.
Yeah, I know. I can hear the smile on your face. I guess something else that we were wondering about, because you mentioned, and a lot of our guests have mentioned, how it's really the skills that they've gained through previous experiences that have allowed them to get the job that they did. As a director, what do you think are, maybe 2 to 3 of the main skills that you use that make you successful at what you do? I feel like I'm like interviewing you for a job now.
No, it's actually very simple. As I mentioned earlier, so when I'm given a new indication, my first task is to understand what the context is, what the disease is, and basically ask the right questions, right?
Mm.
So every disease is like a mystery, and the task we're given is, how do you solve it? What would be the best answer? And you have to ask the right questions as well.
Mm.
How you pose those questions and how you come up with that answer essentially defines how you go about getting a project started. And it's also about finding the right people. Like I said, I'm definitely not an expert in all the different disease areas that I currently work in. So getting the right people to help you is also critically important. Getting the right resources is also very important.
Yeah, I think kind of related to that, you mentioned that part of it is like going to the right people to get the information that you might not have, but you said you also do some hiring. So in new hires, they aren't actually part of the company yet. So what would you look for in that?
Depends on the position, right?
Right.
Sorry, I'm not giving you a straight answer.
That's totally
So if
fine.
I'm looking for a person who's just starting out in the lab, I look for at least some experience in the lab. It doesn't have to have been another industry job, but it could be, a person starting in. Have they worked with a professor? Have they done their thesis? Have they been in the lab? How many hours have they spent in the lab? Can they think independently? Skills you can teach, technical skills you can definitely teach a person.
Mm-hmm.
But is a person, really interested? What motivates that person are the questions that I would ask a person starting out.
Mm.
And it's always helpful to have, my advice to people still doing their undergrads is try and get as much research experience as you can now.
Mm-hmm.
It's only going to help you. Use your summers, at least 1 month out of the 3, if you can spend in a lab doing some independent research work or even supervised research work. That would be super helpful if you want to go into research later, whether academic or industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that when you're looking to hire people, one of the things you kind of look for is what really motivates them to obtain this position. And so I kind of wanted to throw that back at you, and ask you, like, what really motivates you to work in the role that you do?
I like the challenge of it. I like, the biggest motivation is, of course, when you listen to the stories the patients have to share and to think that they have absolutely no treatment available to them in this day and age. And if there's something you can do to help them, I think that's the biggest motivator that there can be.
Mm-hmm.
And from there on, basically the scientific challenge, I will not belittle that either. I like that, the hunt, we do, yeah, absolutely. What can we do to make things better? Can we come up with a solution that people haven't thought about? Can we do this? Can we do that? What will work best? It's solving a mystery. It's as exciting as reading a mystery book.
Very nice.
Yeah, I feel that too. I think when I actually first started studying biology and thought that I wanted to do research, I actually wasn't thinking about it from the aspect of, oh, I can help people. For me, I was like, oh, wow, I just think it's really cool to be able to overcome this virus that has all these tricksy ways to attack your cells. And it wasn't until more recently that I've started to think like, oh yeah, breast cancer is really horrible. Like maybe we should fix that. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from in terms of that response. And then another question we were asking is that looking back, what are some of the things that you wish you had known maybe before you went into pharmacy? I mean, listening to you talk, it doesn't seem like you really have any regrets about what you did. But maybe just what are some things you think would be useful to someone who's going into the pharmaceutical industry today?
So I absolutely love what I do. I have to say that. No regrets at all. I really enjoy it, and I consider myself very lucky that
Mm-hmm.
I ended up here. What would I have done differently if I had known about this?
Or anything you'd like wish you'd known before going in?
Sure. Yeah, I knew nothing about the pharmaceutical industry before starting out. I mean, I coincidentally ended up in drug discovery. I dabbled in a different group. It's a different group in the same company actually. They did a lot of assay development, which is very important, very precise, critical work. But I didn't really enjoy that as much, and I switched over to the drug discovery process as quickly as I could. So when you go into industry, try and learn as much about the company, the kind of research that they do, or if a lot of companies there isn't a lot of heavy emphasis on research. Some of it is often internalized from external sources, right?
Mhm.
So try and read up as much as you can about the different kind of positions that there are. I think what you guys are doing is perfect. Talking to people,
Oh, thank you.
learning about different roles that there are. I think understanding that the roles can be very very different. There's so many different avenues that even you can go into within pharma. Like people who are in manufacturing, say a person who does formulations work, their job description would be very very different from what I currently do. So what motivates you, what drives you, what excites you, trying to stick to that would ensure success for people. I think people do best at what they like to do.
Nice, yeah. And just before we kind of wrap everything up, is there any other paths that you think you can see yourself having pursued and being successful at, or any other paths that you've wondered about before this?
Absolutely. So in grad school, so I knew, like I said, so typically when people think about biology graduates, they typically think, oh, maybe research or teaching,
Mhm.
and then it can be full teaching or a combination in between or something like that. But in grad school, it was surprising to see that I think about a third of my fellow students went into consulting.
Okay.
Oh.
So, and then I would say a good number would also go into patent law.
Oh, wow, that was unexpected.
Right. So again, consulting is a skill that is, you're well prepared by doing a PhD in science, probably.
Mhm.
And there's a high demand for people who can basically solve problems. That is what a PhD teaches you. It's not diving deep into, say, a certain area. It's how to solve problems, and that is a trait that's very well prized, I guess, by consulting companies as well. So they would come recruiting. I joined a consulting club. Was tried it out. It was fun, but I'm more of a direct math person. I love math, as I said, and then I didn't think it was fun, but it was not quite the right fit.
Mm.
I thought about patent law, and it was very attractive for a while. It's basically, you'd have to do a JD after your PhD, but typically your JD would be paid for by the company you'd be signing on.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
interesting. What? I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Right. So, but again, you'd be working while you're doing your JD. It would take 2 to 4 years to complete and get your degree.
Mhm.
It pays very, very well, but again, the work-life balance would probably be not as great in the beginning. So, with all of that, those are the other two options that I had sort of thought about And again, if you're somebody who likes reading patents, that's something to think about as well.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like you have tried out a few different paths before you're like, okay, I'm going to go with this one. So I think that's something for us to take away from this, is that it's good to try out your options early on before doors start closing, kind of thing.
For sure, but I wouldn't say I tried them out. I considered them. Joining a club isn't really like being in a job, for a year, trying out, I wouldn't call myself trying out. I would say I'd expressed some level of interest, but I didn't actually try it out in the way that in practice.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, good luck with all that you're doing. I'm glad you're thinking about your career choices even now. It's great. I mean, what you're doing is perfect. And good luck with, the rest of your talks. And it was great talking to you both.
Thank you very much. So we wanted to take this moment to tell you about our Patreon. We're raising funds in order to help pay for our podcast hosting service, equipment upgrades, and our own website. If you head over to patreon.com/soyougotalifescidedegree, you can view our 3 membership levels and the cool perks that come with them. For $1 a month, you can access bonus minicasts, which are 5 to 10 minute episodes where we talk about the interesting shenanigans in our lives, including weird animal discoveries like the truth behind blobfish. To check out this and our other perks, click on over to patreon.com/soyougotalifescidedegree.
So Lisa, what did you think about that interview?
I think that I'm a bit more inclined to not do a PhD.
Oh, really? That's not what I was expecting at all.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah. I guess it could go either way from that conversation, where on the one hand, you were kind of like, I feel like we both learned that being in such a higher up position in pharma still involves a lot of research, which is kind of cool. So I thought that would incline you more towards wanting to do a PhD. But on the other hand, we talked about how like you can still get pretty far without doing a PhD, and it'll be almost equivalent in time to doing a PhD sometimes.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
The work-life balance thing is rough. I mean, 80, like, come on, like 80, I don't even do that for school.
I mean, were you not aware of that before though? That's kind of the standard.
Listen, man, like I'm like in my penultimate year. This is things for ultimate year students to think about.
She says to the ultimate year student.
Yeah, to the ultimate year student who's been freaking out every week about what they're going to do. I feel like stretching your degree out to 5 years just makes such a big difference. Like, I would be freaking out right now if I had to decide if I was going to take a gap year or do grad school or whatnot. But I feel like 5 years, I'm like, okay, like, hurry it up.
Yeah, I feel like for me, like, it's not really an extra year that I feel like I need, but I think the biggest difference is like taking 4 courses instead of 5. Like, just taking one less course gives so much more room to actually do like career exploration.
It
try
does.
different things.
Yeah,
so definitely would recommend to anyone who's thinking about doing that.
Yeah, I feel that. And doing summer school, although it depends on the person because some people have to work.
Yeah, there's definitely different, things going on.
This is kind of on an aside, like not directly related to our chat, but I've actually started thinking concretely about what would my work-life balance look like if I was actually to join the workforce and if my personal health conditions don't get better. And I was thinking, if I was in some kind of lab associate position or scientist position, I might have to look for jobs where I have to work like only 20 hours a week, like part-time work. And then I can maybe tutor for like 10 hours a week. And then do poetry on the side, like that kind of thing. But I don't know, like that's crazy. Like people say, oh, I want to work like a 40-hour-a-week job because I want to have good work-life balance. And I'm like, that's already so much. Like, what do you mean? Like, it's 2020. We still work this much.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because usually in most jobs you get paid for 40 hours, but really like the standard to do well is like 50 hours, I think, in general.
Oh.
Yeah, but also like, okay, like the 70-80 hour week that we were talking about with the PhD before, like, yes, some people work that much, but I think like to some degree it's a little bit inflated because we have this culture of like everyone has to work more. And also like if you sleep well and eat well and take care of yourself, you can be way more efficient and just cut that time a little bit more. So I feel like it's a bit of an inflated number.
Yeah.
I feel like this year especially, like when I take a break and like come back to work, like I'm so like I can just do so much better. Like, it's ridiculous. But it's like the mindset to go and take a break is so difficult. Like, it feels like the last thing you should be doing is to step away from your computer and like go work out or just like take a nap, whereas like it makes such a big difference in like how much you can actually get done.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. So, like the other day I was stuck on my resume and I was like, I just couldn't decide what to take out. Like I just need to make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then I just gave up on it and then went back the next day and it took me like 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I was really influenced by her saying only do a PhD if you love it, because if I was doing a PhD, it would definitely be the mindset of this is a means to an end. Like, I don't want to be here for 5-6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think I'm just excited to be an adult and just join the workforce and not be in school.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think also, like, if you're the type of person who is going to love doing a PhD, you will probably also do very well in industry because you will be able to, like, do well in your position, do well in the science. And she was saying that one of the key things that a PhD teaches you that they value in their hiring process is like the ability to ask good questions and know what to look for. So I mean, if you're really into the science, like in industry, you will also pick up those skills very well. So I think there's a bit of like a, I don't know, like confounding factor maybe.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting as well when she briefly mentioned that, you know, like people tend to do what they're good at. And I'm like, that's so true. Like when you ask people, what are the sports you like? People list the sports they're good at. Like that was me. Like we don't like things that we're not good at. Like that's why, like part of the reason I think that I really latched onto poetry is that it was something that I was just like, you know, kind of decent at starting out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I wrote that down too. And I think that really is a main point that kind of makes me question the whole follow your passion thing. Because a lot of like your passion just comes from like what you're good at. Like you enjoy doing things that you're good at.
Yeah, and the positive reinforcement you get from other people, like,
Exactly.
oh wow, you're so good at this thing, and you're like, oh, serotonin.
Yeah, it becomes like part of your identity, and then it's like more of a thing for you. Yeah, and so I think like you can just try more things, get better at them, and then you will automatically have a passion. Like,
Yeah,
wow, magic.
That's different though. Like no matter how much math I do, I'm not gonna like be passionate about it. I'm sorry.
I'm not saying you'll enjoy everything. I'm just saying like once you get to a point where you're like, I'm very competent at this, like it definitely increases your enjoyment, which is great news because you don't need to go out there and be like, what is the one thing that like I was predetermined to do and let me go find it out of all these hundreds of thousands of careers. Yeah.
And there's also the concept of like you don't necessarily need to be over the top passionate about, like you can just have your job. Like we've talked about that before. Just be like, you know, your means of income.
Yeah, that's like with the pretext of like, you know, you want to be someone who's passionate about their job or at least thinking about that. I think also like if you're listening to this podcast and scouting out your career options ahead of time, you're probably someone who like wants to enjoy their job.
Something else that Rizwana mentioned that I related to was that she doesn't like teaching. Now, hang on, because I actually like teaching. I enjoy explaining concepts to people. What I don't like is I don't like all the institution and all of the barriers around learning and doing well in school. Like what I don't like, for example, what I don't like is how getting good grades has become so almost gamified in high school, especially in grade 11 and 12, because it's a precursor to university. And I feel like there's a lot of barriers there that kind of exclude certain, you know, kinds of people like low income or like, you know, first generation student from doing well. And yeah, just like the whole process of having to grade kids and then kids are always like, oh, like, you know, are we going to be tested on this? Are we going to be tested on that? Which I do that too in university because I have to play the game. But I don't want to run the game. So for that reason, I don't think I could ever be a university professor.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I definitely agree with some of that. I was talking to my lab PA like I think like 2 years ago, and I kind of was going on one of my known tangents about how U of T scams students in first year because they intake a lot of freshmen with GPAs that maybe aren't up to par, and then a lot of them flunk out, and it's like very much just because of the system they were put into. She was kind of giving a counter argument of like maybe in high school something bad happened, like you could have had a tragic, you know, death in the family, or like maybe you just went through a really bad breakup and like had bad grades because of that. So like by this U of T system, like you're getting a second chance to like actually establish yourself in university as well, which yeah, that's very interesting to me.
Yeah,
I think one of the the biggest things we were surprised about in this interview is how much being a director is very much like being a PI in a university.
Mm-hmm.
And just like how much science is involved. Yeah, I just thought that was really interesting to me and not something I knew before.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been helpful to know that she was director of research instead of just director. Like, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, even director of research, I'm surprised by how much like she interacts with the science itself, though. You were kind of talking a little bit at the end of the interview about how you're getting your first kind of research experience for your thesis and feeling a little bit worried that you hadn't had experience before this.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you are someone who is like really interested in research, just in general, like for our listeners, I guess, if you're in high school right now, definitely consider going to like a very research intensive university. Because I think like being at McGill, like there's pretty much no way you can finish your undergrad without doing some research. The opportunities for research are literally so limitless. Like they really shove it down your throat. And it's like, it's actually good because like you get to try it out. And I feel like in a lot of other universities, it's really hard to get a professor to agree to let you work in their lab. Yeah, and I think like you've expressed this before to me, Lisa.
Yeah.
But at McGill, like it's literally so easy. Like there's just so many ways it's supported for students, like for undergrads to be in the lab.
That's crazy. I mean, I always see McMaster with these huge ads on their buildings saying like the most research intensive university in Canada. I don't know what that actually means. Like, is that based on number of publications per faculty members, or I don't know what the metric is, but yeah, it's definitely difficult, especially for a project where it's one semester the equivalent of one course. It's really hard to find a professor to agree. I think I emailed like 20 professors and I got one professor who interviewed me and said yes and didn't have because of COVID, and then one professor who said let's do an interview but then never responded after that.
Damn. Another thing that I was kind of surprised by, which I really feel like I should stop being surprised by, is how much she felt like she was unprepared for the job when she got in, or like she learned a lot on the job. And
that was the thing I was going to talk about, but I decided not to talk about, but here we go.
Yeah,
I was going to say, like, she mentioned she learned a lot on the job.
Yeah, and I had like a very kind of full-blown conversation about this with my friend yesterday, where he was asking me if I'm considering applying for jobs and maybe gonna take some time off to just work before maybe returning to grad school. And I was kind of telling him how I feel like so unqualified for kind of any job. And he's someone who like has worked in internships and has taken a semester off school to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was saying like, yeah, like basically the same thing when I applied for jobs. And here I am with like, you know, job experience, and you will never feel qualified for a job. So you should just apply anyway and learn on the job.
Right.
But yeah, it's just like, for me, that's a really difficult mentality to like actually lock into, to be like, you will never fully feel prepared and you might not feel like you should be hired, but you actually have like one of the best skill sets for this job. Yeah.
Like I think another way to think about it is that there are a lot of people who are applying to this position who are the same as you, more or less, who equally don't have the skill set for this job. You know, like it's not like everyone you're competing against is like, yeah, I have like 5 years of experience, especially for an entry level position. They're expecting that they'll have to train you. And actually for me, it was really reassuring to hear her say that you can train people on technical skills, because that's kind of what I don't have. I don't have a lot of experience with like mice, i.e. none, or how to run a gel kind of thing. But I'm hoping that my thesis supervisor will just be like, I can teach her that. She writes great summaries.
Yeah. I mean, what she was saying, like, also was just like, well, one is like just your scientific enthusiasm, but then the other side is also like how great that logic in your brain is of like, these are the questions I should be asking. This is what we don't know. This is what we need to find out to actually have it be a legitimate experiment. And I think like that is so strong for you. Like, you definitely have that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I think like why I was surprised specifically in this interview context was that she literally did a PhD. She knows how to do like very thorough experiments and research. So yeah, I was just still really surprised to be like, wow, she still doesn't feel completely prepared in this job context.
That's true. Yeah.
So that kind of made a greater case of like, you don't ever fully feel like 100% prepared. Yeah. Okay, random thoughts. So basically, this is a lightning round of random thoughts of mine. One, I didn't realize that like industries worked with, okay, well, I knew this in like a physics and like comp sci context, but I kind of forgot that industry companies work with academic labs as well. So yeah, that was a good reminder / thing to know.
Also kind of ties into our interview with CBAT about how professors need to commercialize their research.
Yeah, except he was also working for the university, so it's
yes.
And then I guess second I have written here is that she was saying she wanted to do environment originally, but it was a lot about policy, which was like terrible for her, but is like what I enjoyed hearing. I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. That's what I like.
Ooh, yeah. Free to note something down.
So yeah, that was encouraging for me, I think. Yeah, third, I just found it funny that she like really enjoyed math and physics, whereas most people who go into bio are like, oh my god, I don't want to do math and physics. That's why I'm in bio.
Yeah.
Fourth thing, she was saying how in her undergrad, like her biology and life sci professors were so great. And I'm like, this just keeps coming up again and again, where great professors really just make such a big difference to how you interact with the subject.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think like you can't really underestimate that.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think part of the reason why I went into science and went into biology is I had great science teachers in high school. Like I just love that science office, man. I love each and every one of them. They were all great. I still love all of them.
So cute.
One of my best teachers in terms of explaining things and giving clear criteria was my grade 11 chemistry teacher. She was just
Yeah. And then lastly, it was just funny that I feel like she liked all the opposite stuff from what I like, where she was like
well, that makes sense because she has a similar taste as me, and you and I have the similar taste, so the enemy of my enemy is
yeah, but also just like the fact that she doesn't like teaching and she likes the science stuff. I don't know. I thought it was funny.
Oh, yeah. That is a bit different.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like, again, like, I don't like the administrative and the politics around teaching. That
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and then the last kind of bigger point I had was that she kind of claimed that she didn't really fully test out her career, where she did consulting as part of a club, but not like working in that for a year. But I would argue that's actually kind of like a good way to test things out. And I think we've talked about this in previous discussions, where like I think even from small experiences you can gain a lot of understanding. It's kind of like where going from 0 to 1 is like very informative, but after that it's a little bit less informative.
Diminishing returns. Yeah, I feel that as well. I mean, I wasn't about to go argue with her like, no, you did this amazing thing, I'm telling you. But yeah, like I don't think you have to necessarily get a job in something to experience kind of what it's like.
And I think especially earlier in career, where the different options are very like vastly different from each other, you can get a lot of information about if that workflow is even how you want to work, or just like the setup of that job.
To be honest, this is almost kind of making me consider taking 2 years off to work after undergrad instead of 1, at least until I know with some certainty that I want to do this certain grad school, instead of just kind of having an idea and then going to grad school. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, 2 paths diverged in a yellow wood. To be super pompous, and if you're not super pompous, that basically means that, you know, whatever path you pick, it's gonna be okay or the same.
Yeah, that's so funny because that's like there's like a layer of like where that common interpretation of that poem and then the actual interpretation of the poem, and you're going by the actual interpretation. So you're super pompous anyway.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Only the really cool kids will get this one.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I have a personal question for you, Lisa.
Yeah.
We kind of got into this at the beginning, but how far are you leaning towards the no PhD and maybe just join industry and work your way up?
Oh God. I mean, I'm basically 85% I don't want to be a professor at this point.
Okay.
Largely for the reason that I don't like all the institution and all the gamification surrounding grading and creating courses.
Okay.
And then the other part is that it's just a lot of work. Like every professor works more than 40 hours a week, and that's not a life I want for myself. So I think I'm definitely leaning towards industry if I'm going into research.
Okay, yeah. But counterpoint, lead scientists in industry also work like pretty
but they get paid more.
Yeah, okay, fair point. That makes sense.
This has been another episode of So You Got a Life Sci Degree with Rizwana Islam about the pharmaceutical industry. We want to give special thanks to our crew of lovely patrons, including our Little Leaf patrons Naeem and Daniil. If you would like to become a supporter of this podcast, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/soyougotalifescidegree. The music you're hearing is No Regrets from audiohub.com. Thanks for listening and see you next time.